Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my review / RANT on Jaws, The Revenge, the fourth film in the Jaws series, and the last one as of, well, since it came out in 1987. There has been no official Jaws 5 since this film. There's been a couple of rip-offs and imitations and stuff, and even this film where it promoted itself as Jaws 5 and used footage of the first three, but it's not canon to the series. It's not really part of the series. And I don't think Universal distributed it. So there's only these four films from 1975 to 1987. And this film sucks. This film is so bad. It's uncanny. It's terrible. What the fuck happened with this movie? The premise itself seems a bit silly, but you could still make a good film out of it. But no, this film is just it's bad. I won't say it's outright terrible, but it's damn bad. The plot, if you can even call it a plot, of this movie sees Ellen Brody, wife of Chief Martin Brody from the first two films, thinking that there's this shark coming to hunt down her family in revenge of the death of the first one, or the first two sharks. By the way, this film ignores the third film, and I hate it when films just ignore other installments of the series. A bit like with Superman Returns ignoring the third and fourth films. Whilst those ones are the worst two of the series, it's still annoying that they just get forgotten about. It's really annoying on a continuity level, and you know, continuity in some franchises is all over the place, but you know, at least they get acknowledged quite a bit often. Anyway, so Ellen Brody thinks there's this shark coming to hunt down her family, a great white shark, in revenge of the first shark, I guess, or first two sharks, and her fears are supposedly confirmed when her youngest son, Sean, is killed by a great white. Ellen initially doesn't want her son Michael her other son Michael to carry on as a marine biologist working out in the Bahamas, but he convinces her to go with him and his family down to the Bahamas to get away from the things going on at Amity and to spend Christmas with them. Oh yeah, this film is partly set at Christmas and New Year, so it could be argued to be a Christmas film. Which is odd, because the other films in this series are usually taking place in the summer. So Ellen goes with Michael and his family down to the Bahamas to spend Christmas and New Year with them. However, the shark decides to follow them down to the Bahamas, and it attempts to continue its revenge mission by trying to kill Michael, his daughter Thea, and of course Ellen herself. And that's more or less the plot of this film. Oh yeah, and Ellen attempts to try and kill the shark at the end as well. But yeah, that's basically the plot of this film. From that plot aspect, you can tell it's a bit of a silly premise that a shark that has absolutely nothing to do with any of the previous sharks is somehow wanting revenge on the Brody family because Martin Brody Sr. blew up the first one and had the second one kill itself with electricity. Alongside the fact that it's very unrealistic that a shark travelled to the Bahamas in about 3 days that quickly, and as well as in fact it knows where the Brodies are going, alongside the fact that the temperature down in the Bahamas is quite warm, so why the shark is there to begin with is questionable, and why does it stick around? That's the premise. As for the actual execution of this movie, okay, I'll get some positives out of the way first. The emotional elements of this film, especially earlier on, are actually quite nicely done. There's some good emotional elements with the fact that Ellen has to see her son dead, and realise the news, and she's very hysterical about it and is now paranoid about her other son being in potential harm's way. And then going down with him and his family to spend Christmas and New Year with them. And there's some nice bonding between her and the granddaughter. And yeah, there's some good emotional stuff between the characters in this film. And honestly, I buy the characterization of these characters a bit better than in the third film. Even though the actors in that film did have a pretty good rapport with each other, the characters are done a little bit better here. I also think the actor playing Michael is probably the best, or at least of the adult actors, is the best actor to play the character. So he does a pretty good job, and Noreen Gray does a good job as Mrs. Ellen Brody. We also have a character called Hoagie, yeah, Hoagie, played by Michael Caine. He's sort of there to be a love interest to Lorraine, as Martin Brody Sr. had died from a heart attack in fear of the shark, which is complete utter nonsense. It's just a way to write out the character because the original actor didn't want to return for either the third or fourth films. He didn't even want to return for the second one, but he was contractually obliged. Anyway, part of the film has Ellen and Hoagie have some sort of relationship, I guess. It's not the best done relationship, but the actors do a decent job with what they're given. Meanwhile, the great white shark attempts to attack Michael whilst he's working, but so his friend Jake decides, because it's an opportunity to study the great white shark, they're gonna study the great white shark, and Michael sort of agrees. Reluctantly, I would say. He reluctantly agrees to help find this shark. So Michael and Jake and a couple of other guys study the shark, and Michael starts to get a bit scared of the shark as well. He starts getting nightmares and stuff, etc., etc. And to be honest, these scenes aren't really that interesting. You know, honestly, apart from the character stuff, they're not really that interesting. The shark does attempt to attack Michael again at some point, and then the next day Michael goes out to try and tempt the shark, and the shark decides to go after people on the beach for some reason. It could be argued it's going after Fear, Ellen's granddaughter, but whilst it does go after her on the boat it's on, it doesn't actually attack her. It attacks this other random character who has no part in the movie. Yeah, this is a pretty strange revenge plot Jaws has in this film. It wants to go after the Brody family, but it only really kills one of them, and then the other one it tries to attack it, but it doesn't do a very good job with it. And then it goes after another member, but it decides, now I'm going to have this juicy woman instead. And instead of the juicy little girl. By the way, juicy is in what sharks think humans taste like, by the way. So, at this point, Ellen decides enough's enough and she's going to go and ram the shark. I think we should have had a bit more interaction between Ellen and the shark before this point. There should have been something that would have pushed her a bit more to the breaking point. Maybe if the granddaughter did get hurt. Maybe if Michael had been hurt. Something to push her over the edge. This just seems like a snap at just a random moment. Yeah, it almost attacks the granddaughter, but it feels like there should have been a little bit more build up to it. I also find it completely unrealistic that Michael would... He knows this shark's out there, and he wouldn't tell his mother, and he reluctantly allows his friend to seek the shark and not do tests, but study it for the report and stuff. Anyway, Ellen goes out to hunt the shark using Michael's boat, and Michael and Jake team up with Hoagie to try and find her. And eventually they do find her. Hoagie is attacked by the shark, which decides to go after the guy on the plane instead of the guys who were in the water. But he manages to escape and get onto the boat without a limb being broken. I guess he was the lucky aviation person who was attacked by a shark in one of these films, as opposed to that guy in the helicopter from the second film. Oh, poor guy. I still presume he died. Anyway, the characters try to kill the shark using electric shock and bleeping lights, but Jake is attacked and he's then dragged down by the shark, and so Michael tries what he does, and then Ellen, for some reason, just decides to ram the boat into the shark. No build-up, just random flashbacks, and she just decides to ram the boat into the shark, stabbing it or blowing up, depending on which of the two endings you get. I'll talk about that in a moment. And eventually they kill the shark, and then Ellen goes home. Yeah. This climax, in fact, is probably the worst part of the movie. This climax is so terrible. For starters, Ellen has no plan on killing the shark. In fact, basically, she's kind of there for bait, and then that's really all no plan. To hey, come and get me. But she doesn't really have a plan to get rid of it or something. Hoagie surviving is pretty silly somehow, and Helen having these flashbacks to her husband on a boat at a time she wasn't even there. It's when he killed the first shark on the boat. She wasn't there. She wouldn't have seen it. And in the redone ending, the new ending, there's also flashbacks to Sean's death, which she was also not there for, and Thea being attacked, which she was there for, but what we saw in that clip was from the shark's point of view rather than hers. It would have made more sense to have some point of views of the character or scenes with the character acting them, like the scene where she is comforting this girl whose boyfriend has been attacked by the shark in the second film. Or maybe the scene in the first film where the shark attacks the beach, where the boy is, or the guy who's gets killed in the lagoon area where her sons are. Not to mention why she thinks ramming the boat into the shark would have done anything. And in one of the endings, the shark fucking explodes. How? Is it just contractually obliged in the films that each film has to have a shark exploding, apart from the second one where it didn't really explode, it got electrocuted, but you know, this has happened in the first and third films, and for this redone ending, it blew up and it looks so shit. But the ending I watched in as the full film cut. It was broadcast on. I watched on a box of broadcast. It was an ITV broadcast from 2018, and it's the version that I think it's the original theatrical version that was shown in American cinemas, and then the new ending was done for international releases and for the DVD releases. However, the television broadcast seems to use the American theatrical cut, and you know, I actually kind of prefer the theatrical cut, how it's shot and edited, compared to the redone version, because the theatrical cut actually has it's the stabbing, and it's handled they're both shit, but I think the original one was handled teeny weeny bit better than the poorly edited shot and edited Redux version. However, I don't like the jarring transition from the stabbing and the shot of the shark going down, and then fade to black, and then cut to Ellen on the plane going away. It just feels like we're time skipping, and we're going straight to Ellen on the plane just going home. And it feels like the last three films, well, at least the second and third ones, it feels like it feels like the endings aren't very well done. Well, the climax itself is shit, but the very ending of the film is still pretty badly done. The second and third films, like the first, decided to end just as the shark had been killed, maybe a moment afterwards, but basically those films ended just about a minute or so after the shark had been killed. With this one, it decides to have a final scene of Anne going home, but the way it's edited into the version I saw, it was pretty weak. Now, the version with with Jake surviving and the shark blowing up, the shark blowing up bits itself is pretty poor, but we do get shots of the characters jumping into the sea, and as the boat is broken, and Michael finds a still alive Jake, and then we have a much better transition into that final scene when that bit is done. Now, I think that scene actually would work better in transitioning from the climax into the final scene. However, the whole bit with the shark itself is worse than in the theatrical cut version, and I think that version of how the shark is killed is better. So honestly, I think it would have been better if they merged the two endings together. So you have the shark being killed as you see in the theatrical cut, but then you have them jumping off the boat, and then after the shot of the shark being sunk by the pointy out bit of the boat, you then have the remainder of the reshot cut scene, and then that transitions a bit more smoothly into the final scene, and it actually kind of is a bit better. It doesn't save the climax, but it makes it a little bit better. At the very least, a bit smoother. Oh, don't get me started on the special effects. My god, the special effects of this movie are awful, especially in the climax. They look so shit. There's even this one shot where I think it's in the it's one of the two endings where it's kind of the shark is kind of standing up, which is how the boat is able to pierce it in the first place. It looks so shit. This is probably the fakest looking of the sharks of the series, especially in the climax. It looks so fucking shit. And this movie actually looks quite cheap, in all honesty. Not only does the shark look pretty cheap, but it feels like a cheap film. I don't know what it is, but it just feels so cheap. And whilst there's some pretty good cinematography, and the editing is pretty weak, the shark kill at the start is pretty poorly done, and as I mentioned, the climax is awful. There's some decent editing in the bits with the characters, but when it comes to the shark attacks, there's a couple of bad moments, and it just looks so hokey. And this film just has a very tired feel to it. Well, aside from the emotion bits are great, but if a little, maybe not that great, but the emotional bits are good. But it feels like this is a film that's kind of a bit worn out. I wouldn't say it's out of ideas or out of mojo, but it's definitely feeling a bit tired. And maybe the reason was because it was rushed. The film only had about 9 months to be made, as opposed to about 2 years or so, like the last couple, a year or two, like the other films. But yeah, they rushed this film, and it clearly shows. It feels tired. It feels low budget. It looks awful in places, mostly with the shark and the climax. It looks cheap. The shark is especially fake, and the ending, both versions of the climax are pretty weak. And it would have been better if they just re-edited the two endings together to kind of, all these parts of the two endings together to make a a little bit better ending at the very least. Even if the actual climax itself is a bit shit. Reshooting that, re-editing it might actually save it a little bit, but yeah, it's a complete utter mess. I don't know why they decided to rush this film out for a summer 1987 release. Why they couldn't wait till summer 1988 and just try and make a good movie as opposed to a rushed movie. They just wanted to rush out a Jaws sequel for 1987. And it clearly shows that it's a rushed film. Poor dialogue. Characters are okay. Actors do well in places, but they don't get an awful lot of good stuff to work with. And there's just some really silly stuff in this movie. The premise itself is quite silly, as I've already mentioned. Yeah, this film just is a major disappointment, and it sucks. It's a badly made movie in quite a few places. Stuff with the humans isn't too bad, but in terms of a filmmaking side, although story-wise could be a bit better. But in terms of the shark stuff, yeah, it's a pretty weakly done. Pretty weakly done. I will say this: I did like the bit where Michael uses this water tank to go escape the shark and go up into. Avoid it. It felt a bit like what a James Bond film would have, although it is again edited a little bit hokily. But yeah, overall, Jaws: The Revenge is a bad film. It's a very bad film, and easily the worst film of this series, making it the worst of the sequels, as I expected it to become. But yeah, I can officially confirm it's the worst of the sequels. There was some bits I liked and got invested in and enjoyed, but as a film, as a final film, it's bad. It's very, very bad. I will be giving Jaws: The Revenge a 3 out of 10. The The reason I pass it at 3 is, as I mentioned, I did enjoy some bits, and there was some good stuff with some of the characters, and there's some good acting, and there's some stuff. And I don't think this movie, the people went into this movie wanting to make a bad film. They actually tried to do something, but unfortunately, it does feel flat on its face. They failed miserably. Maybe the fact that it was a rushed, I guess. I think the fact that it was a rushed film and the whole premise of the story itself kind of let it down a lot. And then that leads to the other big problems, including the biggest issue, which is the fucking awful climax. As I mentioned, I think that climax could have had maybe not saved, but it could have been a bit better if the two versions of the endings were edited together and make a bit more of a better float ending just before moving into the final scene, but it still wouldn't have saved the climax. The climax is still fucking shit. So, that's Jaws the Revenge. My god, what a poor way to end this franchise. No wonder there was never a Jaws 5, nor the director of this film ever directed another feature film, and actress Lauren Gray, who played Ellen Brody, never starred in the film again. It was her last acting performance. And I can't blame them. This film is awful. It could have been good, despite the premise, but ultimately it just falls so flat. And that was it for the Jaws sequels. Enough is enough. I mean, like I said, I thought the second film was pretty good, but the third and fourth ones, no. And by that point, I think the audiences would have gotten enough of the Jaws films being vastly inferior to the first film. Heck, even if they couldn't reach the heights of the first film, there was lots of people still didn't really like them. So yeah, I think they thought enough was enough by this point, and a Jaws 5 never happened, or at least not an official Jaws 5. It hasn't happened yet. There's a few ideas floating around, like a possible prequel to the first film featuring Robert Shaw's character, or maybe a reboot or a remake or something, but yeah, but at this point there is no Jaws 5. The closest we've got is rip-offs and imitation films. And also the Jaws 19 thing in Back to the Future Part 2. I thought that was a funny joke. But alas for the poor Back to the Future Part 2 and 3 filmmakers, they wouldn't, bless their cotton socks, they wouldn't even know that there wouldn't even be a Jaws 5 by 2015, let alone a Jaws 19. Heck, I don't even think Jaws 19 would be out by 2015. If they did, they'd probably have to be making a Jaws film every 2 years from 1987 onwards in order to get to Jaws 19 by 2015. Maybe we could have been up to Jaws 12 by 2015, perhaps. But yeah, no Jaws 5 as of 2021. Oh well, at least we still got that gag from Back to the Future Part 2. Maybe in that timeline there was at least 19 Jaws films by 2015. But when they changed time, just stopped at 4. Or at least at the moment anyway. So that's it from Jaws the Revenge. Thank you so much for watching this review / rant. I say rant, I wasn't that angry, but you know. Next up will be the Jaws films ranking. You can probably guess what it is. Spoiler alert, it's the release order backwards, if that makes sense. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time for the Jaws films ranking. Until then, or whatever comes next, thank you for watching. See you guys next time. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel.